Let's talk a little bit of ammunition. Remanufactured versus new. Talked about this stuff a bunch with you guys over the years. I kind of want to go a little deeper to the point that I made a PowerPoint. Let's get right to it, and let's waste no time. What's the real difference? New versus remanufactured. And then we're going to answer some questions in this vid. Is it safe? Why do people even make it? Why do some ranges not allow it? Who regulates it? Does anybody? How do I know what I'm getting? You go to that gun show and some dude's like, hey man, I got a bag of ammo, you wanna buy it? And you're like, get away from me, ammo dealer. You don't know what this person made. And then what questions should I ask? If you're talking to a company that makes ammunition, remanufactured or new, and we're gonna dispel a myth here in a minute, what should you be looking for? What should you be asking? We're gonna come back to those. First things first, it's just a pressure vessel. What the heck does that mean? Well, quite simply, got a empty 9mm cartridge here, casing. It's just nothing but a little brass cup, right? I could fill this up with water and I could sip out of it. It's a vessel. It's a vessel. When you put a primer into the bottom of it, into the primer hole, and you put a projectile into the top of it, right? Something like this. Kind of jammed in a little bit too far, something like that. You've now got a pressure vessel. The powder that lives inside of it, as it burns, it doesn't explode. Gunpowder is not exploding. It's burning at a very rapid rate, and as that happens, pressure spikes. So as pressure spikes, something's got to give, and because the chamber of your gun, that's where this guy's sitting inside of the gun, let's just, for the heck of it, grab a chamber, right? So because this breech, as this is called, is tight and shut, and that little projectile's down in here, something's got to give. So what happens? Naturally, as pressure spikes, the bullet shoots down out of the barrel. That can go really well, and it's actually an amazing process for how reliable, for the millions and millions and millions of projectiles built every year. It's amazing how reliable that is. Even when you guys, get a bad batch of ammo and you have a couple misfires or a primer that doesn't work, or worse yet, something like a squib, it doesn't happen that often, especially thinking about how much it's fired. So we've got 4 components: case, projectile, propellant, and primer. We know what the case is. It's just a vessel. It's just a vessel to contain pressure. Then you've got the projectile. In this case, I've got a box here of 115 grain 9mm plated bullets, something that most of us have a lot of time shooting, right? Or would like to. We've got propellant. I've got some unique smokeless powder here. I've got some Ogden. Something we're going to talk about with that is they're not all the same. And then we've got primers. These things are a marvel of engineering and extremely dangerous to manufacture. But without it, you're back to a flintlock or something like that, right? That's the little trick part of this that makes this thing do what it does. From the 22 all the way up to the rifle round there, they're all working about the same, except this 22 is rimmed cartridge. So that rim is got the primer component in it versus the center fire. So we're not going to be looking at that. Nobody I know of reloads 22. But all of these are working under the same principles of what's happening. Let's continue on. I got a cutaway here of a 308. By the way, 308's been around since 1952. This is a 168 grain Sierra hollow point bolt tail round. By the way, I borrowed this photo from the Accurate Shooter Bulletin. So I want you to see the cutaway. We've got the pressure vessel, right? There's the full cartridge, the pressure vessel. This has the propellant in it. Of course, you see the projectile, the bullet, and then you can see the primer down here by my finger. The interesting thing is you cannot just take one of these cartridges, in this case a rifle cartridge, and just fill it up and jam a bullet into it. What we're looking for with ammunition is consistency. Let's see the next page here. I've got a 9mm. This is also a Sierra jacketed hollow point. Been around since 1901. This 9mm that we're all carrying, 119 years. Same thing though. Pressure vessel, casing, powder, primer, projectile. Here's the thing. The way that this stuff is assembled, let's continue on. is just as important as what you're assembling. So what's the deal I've got here? Finish quality is a byproduct of component quality and the care and skill in assembly. I don't know what you guys do for a living, but we all know somebody that is sloppy with their work, and we probably all know somebody that puts a lot of care into their work. It could be a mechanic, it could be a receptionist, it could be a medical doctor, it could be a nurse, it could be somebody that lays asphalt for a living, it could be a roofer, a carpenter, you name it. There's somebody that's sloppy and there's somebody that takes great care. When it comes to ammunition, you want somebody that takes great care. The latter, as I said here, is more important of the two. The assembly process is more important than the components, providing that the components that are being assembled are safe. Consistency is key, and consistency, though, requires rigorous QC, quality control. But QC costs money. Do you work for free? No, and so as I wrote this out, I thought about this. So consistency, to consistently load mass amounts of ammunition, and I'm going to show you my Dillon press that's sitting here in a moment. To load mass amounts of ammunition, you can't use what I call hobby presses like a Dillon setup. You can't do it consistently because they're not built for that. And in order to have QC, you either need very specialized machines, and I'm talking multi-million-dollar equipment, or human interaction and things like case gauges and physical scales. So we're going to revisit that list of questions right now. I should have known that. I wrote the damn thing. Is it safe? Of course it's safe. It's as safe as the person, the company, the entity that's loading. You could take the best components that money can buy, the best pressure vessels, the best brass, and by the way, this stuff can be made with steel. Here's a steel case that my magnet picked up. It's cheaper. It can be made with aluminum or aluminium if you're the rest of the world away from America. It can be made with some new polymer products. Why brass? Well, it's relatively inexpensive. It's moldable, right? So it's cheaper from a machining standpoint. I can reshape this or form it new cheaper than I can many other materials. Is it safe? I think we'll answer that by the time we're done. Why do people make it? Well, a lot of reasons. You remanufacture ammunition because you're cutting down the cost. So any one of us right now could call up the companies in the world that make brass. So for example, I've got friends that own Alpha Munitions. Alpha makes the finest rifle brass on the planet. Not my opinion, it's been tested over and over. Look them up, Alpha Munitions. Their care in how they create that brass, those pressure vessels, is stringent, which gives a very consistent product to the end user. So this is very high-end, long-range rifle stuff. You could do the same thing with this 9mm. Diminishing return states it's not important though. The accuracy potential out of a 9mm can be reached with this handful of range brass. A lot more involved with how I assemble the components, the projectile, and the consistency of those things. Of course, gun's gonna have a factor on that, and the shooter, but we're taking that out of the equation. Talked about powder a moment ago. If you've never loaded, this is important to know. So let's say I've got my setup here. Well, you know what? Why don't we transfer over? So what we're talking about here is the process of loading and how we get a consistent result. So this is a Dillon 650. It's a multi-stage progressive press. Dillon came out with these things in the 70s and 80s, and it's probably the most ubiquitous, what I call hobby loader on the market, which is pretty darn cool that you can set this thing up for about $1,000 or less and be loading 500 to 1,000 rounds an hour. Caveat is there's a lot of work that goes into that. So you source the brass, right? Either new or used, and usually it's going to be used. You source that brass. You are then able to clean it, size it. So that's part of the process here. Resize it. You remove the old primer, and if you want to, polish it. You then choose a powder. So for me right now, we're running in this press, we've actually got accurate powder that we've been running, accurate number 5, which I don't have a bottle of handy here, which doesn't matter. But that accurate number 5, and why this is important, I'm loading about 5 grains of powder. 5 grains is a very little bit of powder. The thing is, if I ran out of accurate and I decided, hey, I'm gonna just grab this Hogden off the shelf and we'll just continue with 5 grains of powder, I could blow my gun up. Conversely, I also could make a round that lost a bunch of velocity. These powders are not all designed the same. It's like bread or paint. It's like saying, give me paint doesn't really cut it. You need to be more specific, and each of these has different burn rates, different criteria that they're designed to fill. So consistency is also, besides the assembly process and the care in assembly, it is consistency in the components. So consistency in the brass, consistency in the powder, consistency in the projectile, so that you, the consumer, gets a consistent result. But then what's next? When you buy brand new brass, I could have brass made that said my name on it. It could have a picture of Mickey Mouse on it. Somebody will make that for me. Or I could pick brass up off the range. Providing that the brass is not damaged, cracked, corroded, brass lasts for a long time. And a projectile like 9mm, for example, you can get quite a few loadings out of these. How many depends on how hot you're loading and how abusive you are to the brass, but there's not a lot of stretching that's happening. 45 you can get a lot out of. Stuff like 40 though, you don't get nearly as much because there's higher pressures inside the case. This isn't a how to load video. I just want to talk about what the difference is. So there's a lot of people loading ammunition that are loading on a machine like this, selling it to you. Now, don't get me wrong. You can load ammunition on a machine like this better than anything money can buy, as long as you've got the time and the energy and the care to do it. To do that at a level where you can earn a profit as a business owner, it is very hard to do even on the bigger versions of this machine like the 1050, because it's not what it's meant to do. So I've got a lot of friends that are professional shooters that load their own ammo on machines like this. They're loading it for themselves, maybe 50 or 100,000 rounds a year, which there's a lot of work to make that all happen. So that being said, what's the difference between the new and the remanufactured? Nothing but the brass. So let's just say we're gonna load something like 115 grain hardball ammunition. I've got the bullets. I could put it in this brass, or I could go pay twice as much for brand new brass. It doesn't matter. What really it comes down to is how it's assembled with the care that it's assembled. So a company like Supervel that I've done business with for years, and I've showed you videos, here's one of the inside of their factory. They're using Kamps machines. They're top of the line loading equipment. This stuff's not cheap. It's not $1,000, it's $30,000, $40,000 for one of those pieces of equipment. It's a commercial loading device, and it is meant to create bulk ammunition and do it reliably, but it still takes a human being checking with things like case gauges. So the finished ammunition is put in here. Guess what? They do that to every round. There's not many companies that do that. Every single round is case gauged. There's other things besides case gauging that you can be done with optics, with lasers, with scales, then chamber pressures. At Supervel, they have a device that checks the actual pressure going on with their loads. Why is that important? People blow guns up all the time because of this. You can ask the companies that you're buying from, do you have this device? I am gonna bet with great certainty none of them do. Why? Because it's very expensive. You're talking thousands and thousands of dollars for this device. The barrier to entry to get that device is really a non-starter for most people. That doesn't mean that you can't produce good ammunition, but when you're talking about bulk ammo, where somebody's selling on the internet thousands and thousands of rounds a month, without these types of quality control measures in place, it is highly probable somebody's gonna get either blown up, you're gonna get a squib, or have a wild experience with accuracy. Why accuracy? Accuracy is a direct reflection of velocity, right? The faster a round goes or the slower a round goes, it's gonna affect the trajectory, the ability of the bullet to fly flat, as we say. So if the ammunition is not loaded with consistent amounts of powder, which creates the pressure in that pressure vessel, you're gonna get different velocities. Is it safe? Should you be buying it? The answer is it's just as safe as brand new ammo. It depends on who's making it. By brand new, it is brand new. It's cleaned up brass. There's so many things that we use in this world that are recycled. It's actually a good idea that we're recycling this and using it. Just purchase from companies that know what they're doing. Why would a range not allow it? Well, because there's plenty of guys that load their own stuff, don't know what they're doing, come to a range and they blow their gun up, and it hurts people, or at the very least stops the range from operating as they clean up a mess. If you are purchasing from a company like Supervel, you can tell a range that you are purchasing factory ammunition, because it's not a dude in his basement loading stuff. It's a factory with people that know what they're doing. This isn't a Supervel sales pitch, but I get this question so much that I felt we'd have this lengthy discussion on it. Might be longer than some of you are interested in, but at the end of the day, you gotta think about the basics. Care in assemblage, quality of individual components, care in how those components that are reused like this are cleaned and inspected. I can honestly tell you, in having personally fired well over 100,000 rounds of Supervel, we're probably approaching more like 250,000 rounds, but having shot that much of it, I have yet to find one case that wouldn't have been acceptable for brand new ammo. I've yet to find one case that was defective. I've yet to find one case that had an issue. Now, I've had one round that I can think of in the last year not go boom from Supervel. It was a primer. No ammunition manufacturer that I know of, besides the couple of the major players, make their own primers. It's just too dangerous a process. The reliability of primers really has nothing to do with the ammunition manufacturer, as they don't make it. So you can't blame that on Supervel or whoever else. Like Black Hills is another company. They're not making their primers. So just food for thought on that. At the end of the day, understand that all of this stuff that we make, the gun on my hip, the shirt on my back, the shampoo I put in my hair, or all the same for you, somebody's manufacturing this stuff. Somebody's sourcing the materials. Somebody's selling this to you. Those people should be standing behind their product. Those people should have care in how they bring that stuff to market. And if they are good Americans, good business people, they care about you just as much as they care about earning a profit. That's a problem when profit becomes key. And there's a lot of companies that wanted to make money off ammunition the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I had never in my 25 years of shooting guns seen a Squib until 5 years ago. I heard about them. I'd never seen them with factory ammunition. I have seen 100 of them in the last 5 years. That's because companies' quality controls went down the toilet. Think about what you're doing. Think about who you're buying from. Ask questions. What's your quality control measures? What type of machines do you load on? Are you using once fired brass? And if so, is that brass inspected? What's your process for inspecting the ammunition after it's completed, before it comes to the end user? What's your process if there is an issue with ammunition for remedying it? Do you have pressure testing devices? Ooh, that's a big one. So I hope this video shed some light on the difference between new ammunition and remanufactured ammunition. In reality, they're pretty much the same thing, only we are recycling that pressure vessel, which is not a bad thing as long as the company involved knows what they're doing. Mickey with CarryTrainer.com. I do hope that you guys enjoy this video. I hope that you enjoy the other videos we put out. Please subscribe, please like. Drew works very hard on these. I do too. We enjoy bringing them to you. We hope to see you at a class soon. Hit us up if you've got questions. Be well, and don't be dickheads. Hey, if you're like me, constantly looking for an edge, Gunfighter Gun Oil. Works in all conditions, never breaks down, never shellacks, keeps your gun lubed and ready to rock. Only available at CarryTrainer.com.